Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register strong protest over the ceasefire violations along the line of control. In a statement, the Foreign Office said unprovoked fighting by the Indian forces resulted in serious injuries to a 70-year-old woman in Subscore sector. Meanwhile, Islamabad has strongly condemned the deliberate attempts to instigate communal violence against Muslims in India. The Taliban have rejected a U.S. Defense Department's report that suggested that the group keeps close ties with Al-Qaeda. In a statement, a Taliban spokesperson said such provocative reports only serve to make Afghans even more skeptical about U.S. intentions for peace. He said the group is committed to the Doha peace deal and will continue to fulfill its part of the agreement. China and Russia have slammed the U.S. over its bid to reinstate the UN sanctions on Iran. In separate press briefings, the Chinese and Russian foreign ministries called Washington's snapback measure illegal. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo threatened to sanction Beijing and Moscow if they refuse to comply with the measures against Tehran. Iran has unveiled new locally made ballistic and cruise missiles amid the U.S. pressure to halt its missile program. Defense Minister Amir Hatami said the new surface-to-surface ballistic missile Qasem Soleimani has a range of 1,400 kilometers, while the cruise missile called Abu Mahdi has a range of over 1,000 kilometers. The U.S. has recorded over 1,300 deaths overnight, raising the toll to over 173,000 with 5.5 million infections. While Brazil has reported more than 1,200 deaths and over 49,000 new COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours. India sees highest single-day jump in COVID-19 cases, with nearly 70,000 tested positive, taking case load to over 2.8 million. While 977 people died overnight. Pakistan continues to report a downward trend in COVID-19 cases and deaths as 8 people lost their lives while 513 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Globally, the pandemic has infected over 22.4 million people and claimed more than 786,000 lives. And in football, Bayern Munich beat Olympique Lyon by 3-0 to reach the finals of the Champions League at Estadio José Alouet. Bayern will be looking for their 6th European crown when they face Paris Saint-Germain in the final on Sunday. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan has strongly condemned the deliberate attempts to instigate a communal violence against Muslims in India. At a press briefing in Islamabad, the Foreign Office spokesman said the protection and support of the perpetrators of such acts by the Indian authorities is reprehensible. Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said the rising incidents of hate crime and hate speech in India are the consequence of the BJP's extremist Hindutva ideology. He was referring to the blasphemous content posted on social media by the Indian extremists. Speaking on occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Chaudhry said India has turned the valley into the world's largest open prison. He said Islamabad welcomes Human Rights Watch's call for an independent investigation into the extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris. The spokesperson said Pakistan values Saudi Arabia's important role in the OIC contact group on Jammu and Kashmir. Chaudhry also said Pakistan supports a two-state solution of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Pakistan has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register strong protest over ceasefire violations along the line of control. In a statement, the Foreign Office said unprovoked fighting by Indian forces resulted in serious injuries to a 70-year-old woman in Subskot sector. Spokesman Zahid Hafiz Chaudhary said the Indian forces have continuously targeted civilian areas. He said India has so far committed 2,027 ceasefire violations, resulting in 16 fatalities and critical injuries to 166 innocent civilians this year. Chaudhary said these violations of international law reflect consistent Indian attempts to escalate the situation along the LOC. He said Indian actions along the line of control are a threat to regional peace and security. The Taliban have rejected a U.S. Defense Department's report that suggested that the group keeps close ties with Al-Qaeda. In a statement, a Taliban spokesperson said such provocative reports only serve to make Afghans even more skeptical about U.S. intentions for peace. He said the Taliban don't need support from any foreign organization. He said the group is committed to the Doha peace deal and will continue to fulfill its part of the agreement. On Tuesday, the U.S. report alleged that Al-Qaeda continued to support the Taliban in attacks on security forces. This comes as the Kabul administration and the Taliban seek to start intra-Afghan talks as part of the Doha peace deal. China and Russia have slammed the U.S. over its bid to reinstate the UN sanctions on Iran. In separate press briefings, the Chinese and the Russian foreign ministries called Washington's snapback measure illegal. China's foreign ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said the U.S. snapback measure is illegitimate and it unilaterally quit the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Well, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybkov said Washington's absurd move to reimpose Tehran arms embargo has no political grounds. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo threatened to sanction Beijing and Moscow if they refuse to comply with the measures against Tehran. Pompeo also lamented European nations' decision to abstain from the UN Security Council vote, saying it made the European people less safe. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump directed Pompeo to submit a complaint about Tehran's non-compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal.
Today, I'm directing the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to notify the UN Security Council that the United States intends to restore virtually all of the previously suspended United Nations sanctions on Iran. It's a snapback. Not uncommon.
The Security Council will have 30 days to adopt a resolution to extend the sanctions relief for Tehran. Otherwise, the measures will automatically come into effect. Now, moving on, Iran has unveiled new locally made ballistic and cruise missiles amid U.S. pressure to halt its missile program. The announcement comes as Washington is pushing to extend a UN-imposed arms embargo on Iran. Iranian Defense Minister Amir Hatami said the ballistic surface-to-surface missile called Martyr Qasim Soleimani has a range of 1,400 kilometers. While the cruise missile called Martyr Abu Mahdi has a range of over 1,000 kilometers. The ministry said the newest Iranian cruise missile will further strengthen Iran's deterrence power. President Hassan Rouhani said the increase of Tehran's cruise missiles from 300 to 1,000 in less than 2 years is a great achievement. China says Hong Kong will suspend some legal cooperation with the U.S. in response to its move to terminate 3 bilateral pacts with the city. At a briefing, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian urged Washington to correct its mistakes over Hong Kong. Earlier, the U.S. State Department terminated the agreements, expressing concern over Beijing's new security law in the territory. It said these agreements covered the surrender of fugitives, transfer of convicted persons, and tax exemptions from ship operations. Beijing has defended the law as necessary to restore order and preserve prosperity after months of violent anti-government protests last year. The US has recorded over 1,300 deaths due to COVID-19 overnight, with the toll crossing 173,000 with over 5.5 million infections. While Brazil has reported more than 1,200 deaths and some 49,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. Globally, the pandemic has infected over 22.4 million people and claimed more than 787,000 lives. More in this report.
As news of vaccines being made across the world stokes hope for many, the coronavirus continues to claim thousands of lives each day. Brazil has expressed cautious optimism that the country's outbreak may be slowing down as the number of new deaths and cases reported dips after a July peak. While in the US, President Donald Trump has touted convalescent plasma as his latest coronavirus treatment.
But I've heard fantastic things about convalescent plasma. And I've heard numbers way over 50% success. And people are dying, and we should have it approved if it's good. And I'm hearing it's good. I heard from people at the FDA that it's good.
In Europe, despite reporting another post-lockdown peak in infections, French President Emmanuel Macron has ruled out reimposing national lockdown. Whereas Spain has issued orders for an outdoor smoking ban, nightclubs to shut, and a curfew on bars and restaurants to help slow the spread of COVID-19. While New Zealand reported 5 new confirmed cases as the nation battles a fresh outbreak in its biggest city of Auckland. In Australia, the second most populous state of Victoria has reported a small increase in the number of cases, raising hopes that the lockdown is yielding results.
It's too early, sadly. I know it's very frustrating, and we'd all love to know a clear blueprint every single day and we tick them off and move from one phase to another. We would love that, the notion, I'm sure Victorians would too, but the issue around the fact that this is not just wildly infectious, but it can be stubborn. It can sit there and be really difficult to extinguish or even to bring down to a much more sustainable number.
In Asia, mainland China reported 7 new imported cases with no domestic transmissions across the country. Meanwhile, South Korea has reported 288 more cases overnight.
India has reported the highest single-day jump in its COVID-19 cases, with nearly 70,000 infections being reported across the country. The jump in cases takes the country's case load to over 2.8 million. The health ministry said 977 people died overnight, bringing the count to nearly 54,000. The ministry reported there are over 686,000 active cases in the country. It said the Maharashtra state remains the worst affected in the country, making up more than 37% of the country's cases. India is the third worst hit country from coronavirus pandemic after the US and Brazil. Pakistan continues to report a downward trend in new COVID-19 cases and deaths as 8 people lost their lives overnight. The health ministry says 513 people tested positive in the last 24 hours. The country's death toll has risen to 6,209, while the infections are nearly 291,000. The ministry says the number of active cases across the country is 11,945. It reported a recovery rate of over 93% across the country. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 127,000 infections, while Punjab has reported nearly 96,000 cases. Israeli soldiers have martyred a Palestinian youth near the Deir Abu Mishal village in the West Bank. Officials said Mohammed Haziz succumbed to his wounds after Israeli troops shot 3 Palestinians. The Palestinian Red Cross said the 2 wounded youths were taken to the hospitals in Ramallah. The officials said the Israeli army informed Haziz's family about his death hours after the soldiers had detained him with fatal injuries. They said the Israelis are yet to hand over the youth's body. Earlier, the Israeli alleged the youth carrying incendiary materials and tires, wanting to set them on fire. US President Donald Trump says he expects Saudi Arabia will join the Israel-UAE deal known as the Abraham Accord. Speaking at a press conference, Trump said a lot of countries want to join the deal. Under the US brokered deal, Israel has agreed to suspend West Bank annexation for a complete establishment of the diplomatic ties with the UAE. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia says it will not forge a diplomatic relationship with Israel until Tel Aviv signs a peace accord with the Palestinians. It added that Israel's unilateral moves with regards to settlements in the West Bank are hindering chances for peace in the Middle East. Lebanon's Hezbollah says it will not evaluate the verdict of the UN tribunal that convicted its member in the 2005 killing of former Premier Rafiq al-Hariri. While addressing media, Hezbollah MP Hassan Fadallah said the movement is not concerned about the verdict. Fadallah said the group has never recognized the court and its stance has been further solidified by this new verdict. While the court found no evidence of direct involvement by the leadership of Hezbollah, the judges said the killing was clearly a politically motivated act of terrorism. The movement has been under intense scrutiny as many allege its involvement in the port blast as well, which killed more than 180 people. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. U.S. Senator Kamala Harris has accepted the nomination for Vice President on the third night of the largely virtual Democratic National Convention. Harris is the first black woman and Asian American on a major U.S. presidential ticket. Details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic has forced Democrats to abandon the cheering throngs, fanfare, and razzmatazz of the typical party convention. So they went with a virtual event of pre-recorded and live speeches in Philadelphia. Speaking at the convention, Kamala Harris assailed President Donald Trump's failure of leadership. She said President Trump's disastrous leadership has cost lives and livelihoods during the COVID-19 pandemic. She urged American voters to come together to elect Biden and beat Trump in the November 3rd presidential election.
We must elect a president who will bring something different, something better, and do the important work. A president who will bring all of us together, Black, white, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, to achieve the future we collectively want. We must elect Joe Biden.
Meanwhile, former U.S. President Barack Obama was the headline act of the night as he accused his successor of dealing with the presidency as a reality show.
Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't. And the consequences of that failure are severe. 170,000 Americans dead. Millions of jobs gone, while those at the top take in more than ever. Our worst impulses unleashed, our proud reputation around the world badly diminished, and our democratic institutions threatened like never before.
Obama said electing Joe Biden, his vice president and now the Democratic candidate for president, will ensure survival of American democracy. Biden will take on the Republican President Trump in presidential elections on November 3rd.
Russian opposition politician Alexey Navalny has gone into coma after allegedly being poisoned. Navalny's spokeswoman Kyra Jarmish alleges he felt sick after drinking a cup of tea laced with poison. Yarmish says he is in intensive care and is on an artificial lung ventilator. Hospital officials say it is not certain that Navalny was poisoned or not, but tests are being conducted to find the reason for his sickness. Navalny started feeling ill when returning to Moscow from Tomsk in Siberia by plane a day earlier.
Naturally, poisoning is considered as one of the possible reasons of the deterioration in the condition, but besides that, there could be a number of acute states that lead to the same clinical signs. We are working on everything: eliminate, confirm, and work.
Alexey Navalny, a lawyer by profession and an anti-corruption activist, is a fierce critic of Putin administration. Now moving on, Ukraine's presidential office says the country's armed forces will be withdrawn from 4 more locations in the eastern Donbass region. The statement comes after the trilateral contact group of Russia, Ukraine, and the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe held a video conference. President's office said 20 areas discussed at last year's Normandy 4 summit in Paris will also be cleared of mines. The statement said this will enable the Paris Agreement's articles to be realized more quickly. The OSCE's head of special missions, Yasar Helichevik, said a ceasefire has been observed in eastern Donbass since July the 27th. Russia and Ukraine have been at odds since Russia annexed Crimea after a controversial referendum in 2014. South Korea's Green Cross Go has received a regulatory approval for phase 2 human clinical trials of its experimental COVID-19 plasma treatment drug. The company said the trials will test the safety and efficacy of the drug in 60 severe patients with underlying conditions like pneumonia. Its therapy is the country's first to enter phase 2 for coronavirus plasma treatment. Meanwhile, Mexico said it will carry out phase 3 testing of the Russian coronavirus vaccine. Elsewhere, Turkey is in talks with Russia, Germany and China about conducting phase 3 trials for coronavirus vaccines. Cuba will also start clinical trials next week of a potential vaccine called Soberana 01, developed by its state-run Finlay Institute. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has left for China to attend the second round of the China-Pakistan Foreign Ministers' Strategic Dialogue. The first meeting of the dialogue was held in March last year. Qureshi said his visit will prove to be a beneficial one for both the countries. The dialogue is aimed at strengthening strategic relations between Islamabad and Beijing over a range of issues. During the meeting, both sides will discuss ways of strengthening cooperation, COVID-19, and regional and international issues. Qureshi is accompanied by senior officials, while the Chinese delegation will be led by Foreign Minister Wang Yi. In Pakistan, 14 people have died in torrential rains overnight in different parts of the most populated Punjab province. Rescue officials say several were injured in rains that devastated the central region of the province. They said 5 people were killed in Mandi Bahuddin after a fragile home's roof collapsed. The official said 4 others were killed in a similar incident in the eastern Lahore city. In Chakwal, 3 laborers lost their lives after being stuck in a coal mine during rains. 2 others died in Shahpura city. Hurricane Genevieve brushed the southern tip of Mexico's Baja California peninsula as 2 people drowned in heavy seas. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said a hurricane warning was in effect for the resorts of Los Cabos and the town of Todos Santos. It warned that rainfall from Genevieve may lead to life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides in the area. The storm is also expected to produce swells, which are likely to cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions. The National Met Service reported the center of the hurricane is located 75 kilometers southwest of Cabo San Lucas town. The hurricane has now weakened to a Category 1 storm. Meanwhile, astronaut Chris Cassidy managed to capture the storm from the International Space Station. China says the U.S. has agreed to hold trade talks over the Phase 1 trade deal in the coming days. At a briefing, Commerce Ministry spokesperson Gao Feng said the talks will evaluate the progress made on the trade deal in the past 6 months. Gao's remarks come after U.S. President Donald Trump postponed August 15 trade talks with China, citing its handling of the coronavirus. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and Chinese Vice Premier Liu He were scheduled to conduct a 6-month review of the trade agreement last week before it was indefinitely postponed. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows also confirmed that no new high-level talks were scheduled between Washington and Beijing. The White House says it will be unusual for the U.S. Treasury to get a cut from the sale of video sharing app TikTok's U.S. operations. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow said U.S. President Donald Trump probably wants to deny China some of the proceeds from the sale. Kudlow was unsure if any funds will end up in the Treasury, saying the proposal itself is unusual, but Trump has his own opinion on these matters. Last week, Trump ordered ByteDance on TikTok to divest its U.S. operations within 90 days in a bid to pressurize Chinese firms over data security concerns. Trump suggested the U.S. government should get a substantial portion of the proceeds from the sale. Recently, the Oracle Corporation expressed an interest in procuring the app's operations in North America, Australia, and New Zealand. In football, Bayern Munich beat Olympique Lyon by 3-0 to reach the finals of the Champions League at Estadio José Alavet. Bayern will be looking for their 6th European crown when they face Paris Saint-Germain in the final on Sunday. Lyon's Memphis Depay called Toko Ekambi missed early chances before Bayern grabbed the lead through Serge Gnabry in the 18th minute. Gnabry struck again in the 33rd minute as he started and finished the move that involved Robert Lewandowski and Ivan Perisic. Lewandowski made sure of the result with a strike in the 88th minute as the French side were left to rue more missed chances in the second half. The German side will be looking to become the first team to win the Champions League with a 100% record in the tournament this season. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.